Hello, and thank you for watching this video on employee workplace safety. I'm going to be talking for the next few minutes about some new policies and procedures that we're putting into place to make sure that our employees and our customers have the safest environment possible with what's going on now with the pandemic. We've been watching the state and CDC guidelines, and they're ever changing, but we got the newest ones in for the reopening of retail and some other businesses in the state. So we wanted to update our employee procedures and our rules for those working currently and for those customers that are coming in and how to deal with them. So we're going to talk for a little bit about some of the procedures that are being put into place. We're also providing a written form of this as well that you probably have with you or is available to download. But wanted to run through it step by step so I can explain some of these parts, as this is all new and it's new for all of us. So we're just going to keep adjusting and moving as things change. So as the state relaxes some of its guidelines, we'll be relaxing them as well as they impart some new ones or they find some new best practices that seem to work. We're going to implement anything new that we think that can help as well. So just to start from the beginning, some key first and foremost as far as working and coming into work. First, if you feel sick, if you feel like you're exhibiting any symptoms or you're running a fever, please stay home. Don't come on property. If you even think that you're feeling sick in any way, don't risk it. Don't come on property. If you're living with somebody that starts exhibiting symptoms, or somebody that's not feeling well, let us know immediately, but do not come into work. This was the first key step into avoiding the transmission of the virus. Now we know that currently you may not have symptoms, but you may still, if you're around somebody with the virus, that you may still be able to transmit it, and that's why some of these other procedures are going into effect to assure the safest workplace possible. So first and foremost, if you're feeling sick, please don't even try to come on property. Just call your manager and let them know, and we'll go from there. When you're on property and when you're around other employees and customers, please remain 6 feet away from them at all times. This is important. We're going to have some customers eventually inside the pro shops or inside the restaurants, and with people moving around, we want to make sure that we keep our distance as much as possible from everybody else. This also includes your distance from other employees. So when you're moving around working in a station, and some workstations, which I'm going to talk about here shortly, have more than one person working inside of it, and you're moving back and forth. It's imperative that you try not to cross paths with somebody within 6 feet. I know it's a lot of working back and forth, and it's a lot of movement around, but especially inside or behind counters or at the checkout counters, we can't have people that close together, especially for a long period of time or any period of time. If you do have to pass somebody, please pass somebody as wide as you can to create as much distance as you can, or notify that person that you have to get into that location so that they can create some space. So if it's behind a counter and you need something from underneath, please notify the person standing at the counter, excuse me, I need something from underneath there, so that can give them room and time to move out of the way. Keeping distance between employees is a key number 1B of things to limit transmission between people to people. We're all going to be dealing with customers. We're all going to be working in a similar environment. We have to keep our distance as much as possible. If you are not working, and this is a key one, especially for some of our golf staff, if you are not working and are not on the schedule, please do not come up and hang out. I know this used to be a social place, and believe me, nobody more than me wants to get back to catching up with everybody, hearing some stories, and getting back to socializing. We need it just as a community, but this is not the place for it. Above all, we have limited space when we're trying to run an operation. We can't have anybody coming into the golf shops or coming into the restaurants to just simply hang out and talk with other employees and see what's going on. If you're not on the schedule, you're going to be asked to leave the property if you come to just hang out and talk. Please don't put us in that position. If you're on the schedule, come in and work, But if you're not, please don't come into the golf shops to simply hang out. It's just not a possibility right now. When you do come in, you're going to be assigned a workstation, and this is something new, and it was something new from the state, and we're kind of putting our own spin on it, or adapting it to fit our facility. We have a lot of moving parts. So while a lot of these regulations are designed for office workers, when you have a set number of staff, they have individual workstations, and it's just in and out day to day. We have a lot of moving parts, so we're trying to adapt our areas to fit that. But the first key to this is going to be assigning a specific workstation to you depending on your job. So the workstations are listed on the sheet here, but are going to start from the golf aspect. The pro shop manager or the management in the pro shop will have a station outside of the counter, so they can move between inside and outside of the front door if necessary to direct some of the customers or to deal with them outside of the counter. Most other employees are going to be a pro shop employee, which are going to be stationed behind the counter at the point of sale machine. Your job will be ringing up the customers, processing the transactions, but we're going to create that space behind the counter as your workspace. So when you get in, it's the beginning of the day and you come into your position or the beginning of your shift, please sanitize the stuff at the station from the person in front of you or that may have worked earlier or the day before. Just as an abundance, they should clean it at the end of their shift as well. But clean the phone, clean the keyboards, the mouse, anything that you're going to be touching in your defined area. Once you're in your area, that's your area of work. We want you to have a mask, which I'm going to talk about, and gloves, of course, which I'll touch here shortly. But this is your defined work area. One of the things that is really, really, really important to stress, and this is why these have to be defined, is one of the major risks is contaminating other areas while you're at work, and then somebody else going into that area and then transferring that anything that was on the surface back to other places. And that's the key behind of what the state wants to avoid happening, is transmitting this thing across multiple surfaces. So I know we have the idea that you're wearing gloves, which we have, and I'll touch on, like I said, in a little bit. But when you have gloves on, that protects your hands, and that's safe, and that's what we want. But the gloves themselves, and you have to understand that anything that comes in contact with a shared surface, so if you're working the checkout counter and you're handling credit cards or money or stuff back and forth between a customer or anything from the outside, that can be on the surface of the gloves. If you're in your own work area, you have your gloves on, that's all in one spot. If you leave your work area wearing your gloves, your hands still remain clean, but the gloves can transmit the any viruses or anything that's on the surface. So when you leave your designated area and go to another area and touch something, even though you have gloves on, that can spread whatever was there, whatever was on that card or cash, to another area, and then that infects that table or that chair or that door, and then somebody from another workstation touches that area and then it brings it back, and so on. So this is the key point of eliminating transfer between areas, is when you're in your work area, wear your gloves, wear your mask, but if you have to leave your area, then you have to sterilize or wash your hands or wash the surface that you touch. Every employee is going to be define their work area when they're on shift, and you shouldn't leave your area unless either the job requires it, if you have to go get something that is required, or you're taking a lunch break or a bathroom break, that you have to leave your area and then come back. But when you do leave your space, please, you have to wash your hands or sanitize them so you don't infect another surface. So we think we can provide these stations for each of the employees that are going to be your work areas that you can do your work in, and if you have to leave those, sanitize and then leave. That way you don't infect anything else or spread anything else through the property. While we're on this, and I'll touch on it again, I said about gloves. Gloves protect your hands, but they can have stuff on the surface. So, because there's a very limited supply and there's a very limited supply chain right now, gloves aren't readily available. We're trying to buy as many as we can from whoever we can, but they do have a cost. And to limit the amount of expense incurred here, we don't want to just start rolling through gloves, taking them off, throwing them away every time you leave. You can sanitize gloves that you're wearing. If you're leaving your work area, either use the sanitizer that we're using in the spray bottles, or wash your hands like you normally do, soap, water, 20 seconds, and sterilize your hands with your gloves on, and then you can go to another area. And then when you return, the same thing, just so you don't carry anything back. But it's important to know that when we have these stations set up, please stay within your station, unless your job or those other things like a lunch break or a restroom break require you to leave. But when you do leave, be very cautious of what you're touching and what you're taking back and forth. So we ask that everybody stays in their designated station when they're on shift. These will be different for both facilities and for different environments, but to give you an idea, obviously the checkout cashier is behind the counter. That's going to be their space. Carts and rangers are going to be outside. Cart attendants out in the cart barn out front. Rangers in their ranger cart, which again, sterilize when you get here, get set up, get your equipment, get your clipboards and stuff, wipe it all down. Your cart is your work area over by the first tee, driving around the golf course, but that's going to be your station. The cart guys, outside in the cart barn, out in front, ready for some people when they come in. But again, limiting this, and this is very important for that crew too. I know it's a habit of ours to come hang out in the pro shop and again talk and hang, but we can't risk infecting another surface and bringing anything that was outside. Again, you're working with the carts, you have your gloves on, but as soon as you come in and touch a counter, touch a chair, touch a table, then that area becomes a common surface again, and it can transmit the disease. So we're limiting everybody to just staying within your zone, staying within your work area, and that should help limit any spread from department to department. Upstairs for both the snack shops, it was another reason why we moved the snack shop upstairs at both locations. It provides just an alternate area that is strictly for the snack shop and snack shop employees, and should be pretty easy to keep isolated in those areas as well. We're working on the infrastructure for all of this. Obviously, as things arise or as questions or new things that we think of come up, we'll adjust. But this is the reasoning behind that, and the importance of everybody staying in their respective areas to limit transfer from both surface to surface and person to person. So that is basically a recap of the workstations and where you're going to be when you're on property. Second is masks, as you would imagine. So wearable masks, reusable, washable masks are going to be required for employees. They're required by the state. You have to have them. You have to have one to come into work. If you don't have one, we can get one for you. We suggest that you have more than one, as they're washable and you may work multiple days in a row, so that you have one ready to go and then you can wash them when you get home. But masks are required for workers, no exceptions. You have to have a mask to come to work. It protects you and it protects everybody else, and that's mandated by the state. That's not a decision of ours, although it would be even if it wasn't. You have to have a mask to come into work. Gloves, like I mentioned before, we do have gloves here. We can provide them for you. If you have your own and you wish to bring them, that's perfectly fine, but we have gloves here for you. And we want you to wear them when you're working with common surfaces, common touch surfaces, interacting with customers, or interacting with something that customers touched, like the carts or the range balls, etc. If you're handling anything that a customer has handled or a customer has touched, then we want you to wear gloves. But again, being aware that gloves protect your hands, but they can also spread the virus. So if you are touching that stuff, it's inside your workstation. If you have to leave your workstation, then sanitize your gloves, wash your hands, so that you don't spread that to other areas of the property. This is very important, and I can't stress it enough. I know it's something new. It's something a little bit outside of our comfort zone. It's going to be hard to remember how to do that or when to do that. So be cautious of it. Be prepared for it. Everybody's going to keep their eye out, and we're going to watch each other, make sure that everybody is safe and our environment is as safe as possible. Washing the hands is next. Obviously, if you're taking a break or going to lunch break, remove your gloves, wash your hands, wash them for 20 seconds as they've been advising. The full lather up, get every part, wash it completely, rinse and then dry, and then you're ready to go. The next part, which combines with that, is eating. So if you are taking a lunch break or you're eating something, we are going to have designated eating areas so that food you're not eating in an area that could be a touch surface by somebody else. This is imperative, especially in the golf shop, and this is why when I mentioned earlier about workers coming in to hang out or people coming in from the outside just to sit down and hang around, we don't want the common surfaces being touched, so that if you came in for your lunch break and sat at that table, that somebody was there that shouldn't have been there. So we're going to have designated eating areas for the lunch breaks. These are going to be upstairs because it's the most isolated place right now until we figure out what the restaurants are doing. Upstairs at a table, away from everybody. You can take your lunch break, eat or drink whatever you needed, and then you clean that place up, sanitize that before you leave, and then you can return to your workstation. When you return to your workstation, you put gloves back on, put your mask back on, and then follow the procedures from there. But eating while at like a lunch break while on work, we're going to have these designated eating areas so that things are separated and we aren't eating in an environment that could be a shared environment. Phones is another touch point that is it's going to be a work in process. We don't have an abundance of phones, so we're trying to station them in places that is most efficient. But sharing phones is obviously sharing a common surface or a common touch surface, which we're going to try to avoid as much as possible. So first, the phones that are designated inside your work areas are yours. So those behind the counter, those are the people that are going to be answering the phones, and those are the people that are going to be using that particular phone. So sanitize it when you get in on your shift, and that's your phone to use at that point. One of the most common things are going to be, you need to transfer a phone call. You need to say, all right, hold on 1 second, and get it to somebody else. We're going to have procedures in place to do that. We're going to use the transfer button, which we haven't used before a lot of times, to transfer to another phone. So this will probably be to a Pro Shop manager or your manager where there's another location, whether it be in the office or whether it be on the outside in the golf shop, where that phone is going to be, again, dedicated to them. So we transfer, and I'll have the instructions and stuff for that listed around the phone, but we'll transfer to that extension so it goes to that person. If you need to share the phone, if the circumstances don't allow transfer, we'll simply wipe the phone down, hand it to that person, and then sanitize it when it comes back, if that's at all necessary. That's the last resort. The step in between, the step in between that, if that is not available to transfer, we're going to use the speakerphone button first as the next alternative. So just use it on the phone, where you're at behind the counter or on the wall. Hit the speakerphone button, and that person can have a conversation without handling the headset or the earpiece, and that way keeping things a little bit safer. And then, if at all, last case, if you have to share a phone, sanitize it and give it back, and then we're back to normal. So we're going to keep working on that process, but that's at least what we can do for right now. Each place is going to be a little bit different based on the environment, so we'll just take that step by step, but just keeping a cautious eye on shared items and shared surfaces. We're trying to avoid people coming in and out of a work area that's designated for a particular employee, and if we do that by transferring rather than sharing a headset, that helps in that area. Any other shareable surface is on that list of things that we have to keep an eye out for. So if you're in a common area, please restrict yourself from touching items, from moving things that aren't necessary. Again, I know it can be a habit sometimes to help straighten up or just to kind of sit down in an area. We'll do our best to provide any equipment that you need in your workspace, chairs or tables or anything storage that you will need to limit, again, the shared surface space, but We just want everybody to be on extra alert as far as shared spaces and shared surfaces. If you do happen to use a shared space or come into contact with a shared space outside your work area, and it's not immediately available to clean or sanitize, and there's somebody else working that day, please let everybody know that, hey, I just used that table, I just used that chair, just FYI, so that we can either avoid other people using it for the time being, or we can get that cleaned and back to normal as quick as possible. So it's really about just being extra vigilant to provide the safest place for both our employers and our customers. As we work toward opening up to customers inside, which is going to be the next step, it's going to be a difficult one because this is all new for everybody. But if we have some of these procedures in place, that it'll help keep our staff separated as much as possible from the customers when they do come in, and provide the safest area available. These rules that are set forth right now and going forward they're mandatory for the safety of our employees. We know that they're different. We know there's going to be some scenarios that they may or may not fit perfectly. It's a work in progress. Please keep that in mind. But please know that these are not suggestions. These are not things that we want you to try and do if you can or if you want to. We know there's some different opinions on the virus itself and a lot of these state restrictions and such, and you're entitled to your opinion, absolutely. But as an employee, for the safety of all employees, we have to provide an environment that is as safe as possible for everybody. We know from the state and from the governor and from the CDC that nobody can provide 100% safe environment. You just can't. They've said this a number of times in their press conferences, and the CDC has said the same. Simply, leaving your house, you're going to encounter some scenarios that aren't 100% safe. It's the responsibility of the business to provide the safest environment possible, and that's what we're going to try to build here, the safest as we can, to provide the environment for both our customers and our staff. If at any time you don't feel comfortable in the station that you're in or doing a job that you're assigned to, please tell your manager, and we will get somebody else to do it. This doesn't limit the requirements as an employee, but from a safety aspect, if you have concerns, please bring them up the chain. If you talk to your manager and nothing happens, you can talk to me directly and we'll get it addressed. But nobody is required to work here. If you don't feel safe and you don't feel that you want to come in because maybe a family member is at risk and you don't want to transmit anything back and forth, we fully understand. It's no problem at all. Let us know what we can do from a scheduling standpoint. We can see about getting you in another division if there are hours available. Whatever we have to do to make it the best for you as an employee, we'll make it happen. But if we follow these guidelines to the T and really, really vigilantly work at keeping the workspace as safe as possible, it's going to be the best for everybody. And we really, really ask your cooperation in doing this. If you have any ideas or suggestions, because this is an ever-evolving process, please bring them to our attention. We would love to make things more efficient. You guys are working in these stations and may know a better way to do some of these things. And if that's the case, we absolutely want to do what's best and most efficient. So we would look forward to any ideas that anybody has. But for the time being, this is the current update on the employee regulations and safety procedures. We're asking you to read over and sign the papers that are accompanying this video so that you have a written explanation, but we thought the video would be helpful in explaining some of the things in more detail. As text is what it is, it's sometimes better to explain in person, and since we can't have a big employee meeting, this is the next best effort. So thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions, please let myself or any of your managers know, and we'll address it as soon as possible. But other than that, thank you for your cooperation, and we'll see you soon.